It's really lovely to be here with all of you today. It's an honor, and I thank all the organizers for putting this fantastic symposium together. Um, so, in the last few years, there have been many conversations, articles, presentations on past military interventions and peacekeeping missions in Haiti, their impacts, their role in creating the present in Haiti. And while these conversations, can you hear me? Okay. While these conversations and debates have been happening, the international community continues to intervene in Haiti on a daily basis in peaceful ways. And this is through the delivery of international aid, which is both development and humanitarian aid. So I'm going to provide a little historical context, a really brief one, before getting into recent debates around aid. So in many ways, foreign assistance and military assistance have walked hand in hand since the end of World War II. We had the Marshall Plan, which inspired the creation of international institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, the UN, and a lot of different NGOs. Then that moved into the Truman Doctrine, then the implementation of foreign assistance into policy, leading to the formation of USAID in 1961 under the Foreign Assistance Act. The post-World War II, early Cold War era is really what brought into play the modern concept of international aid, largely driven by the United States. So that's a very general background of aid in its current form. So fast forward, so around the year 2000, with multiple global crises and urgency of climate change, elevated humanitarian needs, increasingly complex political situations globally, the current system of international aid really was put to the test and questioned. So there's been criticism of its roots, its rationale, its operations, resulting in calls for fundamental change to address colonial and imperial legacies, as well as racism, and of course, impact and effectiveness. In Haiti, the first NGOs stepped foot on the island in 1954. The exact date was around October 12th. Charlie. I'm being told 2 minutes. Left. In 1954, I'm only like 20. Yeah. Okay. So, thank you, Leonie. So, was after Hurricane Hazel, which hit on October 12th, 1954, and it was actually referred to at the time as Douze Octobre. The NGOs that showed up at the time were CARE International and Catholic Relief Services and the Red Cross. CARE International and Catholic Relief Services were NGOs that were formed in the early 1940s to the mid-1940s and were created to provide support and services to survivors and victims in Europe. Since that time, NGOs have flooded into Haiti, and by the 1990s, Haiti became commonly referred to as the Republic of NGOs. And Clinton at some point estimated about somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 NGOs, which is the second most per capita in the world of NGOs. So the response to 12 Janvier has been widely recognized by academics, filmmakers, journalists, and even aid practitioners as having sidelined Haitians completely. And that's not just communities and organizations, but even the Haitian state. And this is despite the global conversations happening around aid, such as the Paris Declaration on Aid Effectiveness in 2004, the Accra Action Agenda in 2008, and then after 2010, there continued to be conversations by the Saphir Project to create minimum standards. And then in 2015, we had the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and that same year, the Charter for Change. And then in 2016, the World Humanitarian Summit, which was held in Istanbul, Turkey, birthed what was called the Grand Bargain. And the Grand Bargain is really what brought the term localization to front and center. There's not really a singular definition of localization, but signatories were committing to, quote unquote, making principled humanitarian action as local as possible and as international as necessary, end quote. So the discourse around localization is broad. USAID, which Sarah will talk about a little bit more, applies the term localization to both humanitarian and development actions, and has timelines for achieving particular localization objectives. In Haiti, there's a cadre of organizations called CLIO. There's about 80 international organizations and national organizations within this coalition. And in 2021, they issued a report called Localization, Words to Action. And what they found in this report was that not everyone equally mastered localization. And when discussing it, no one could actually agree on its implementation or what it really meant. Other UN agencies have committed to localization around local procurement, increased cash transfers. There are other terms that have come into play to attempt to localize, including accountability to affected persons, communication with communities. These efforts have been evaluated by groups after the 2016 Hurricane Matthew, and after the 2021 earthquake, and the summary was they had fallen short. Still others do not identify with the term localization, still other groups and organizations, and others believe it is only paying lip service to addressing deep-rooted issues shaped by long-standing imperial and colonial legacies. And others continue to demand that there be a shift in power and decolonize aid. Overall, what we can say is that there's little consensus of localization practices and effective aid practices in general amongst international NGOs and agencies. Development and humanitarian actors continue to be largely siloed in their actions despite global efforts to link humanitarian, development, and peace-building efforts, which is commonly known as the triple nexus. Of course, there are some groups that have been much more effective than others. For many of these global discussions and commitments, the primary and most important stakeholder continue to be sidelined, and that is the communities impacted by crisis or disaster. They were not present when the commitments around localization were made or the charters were written. But there's certainly a consensus in communities in Haiti, from the rural to the urban, as to their general experience of international aid and what works better and what does not when it comes to outside interventions. I'm looking at Charlie for minutes. Thank you, Charlie. What I think we can all agree on is that the first and last responders, and Leonie was saying this before too, are always from the community itself in the case of earthquakes, hurricanes, et cetera, and also conflict. And they are also best suited to understand their own development needs and to build the futures they envision. But these actions are rarely foregrounded in the dominant narratives or cited as primary actors as in humanitarian or development actions. So in Haiti, there also have been many collective practices and mutual aid that exist that have shaped action within society, such as Combi, which we will talk about a little bit more, Lacu, Rassemblage, Sol, and many others. And there are proverbs that exist as forms of collective governance and living, such as voisin c'est famille, which is your neighbor is your family. In addition, there are social leaders and socially engaged groups all across the country, socially engaged groups, excuse me, all across the country that are rarely recognized by international NGOs and agencies, but could use a little support that have a real impact in their communities. That could have a real impact in their communities, I'm sorry. So for today's panel, we have a really diverse group of people speaking today. But I think what I can safely say is that most Haitians will say that outside support is needed right now, and Haiti needs real friends as it moves through this very layered crisis and moves towards peace and justice. But that Haitians must be leading. I think it is necessary to disrupt this binary that exists, that local is good and international is bad for this conversation. I think what we'll hear today from the diverse participants in this panel are further discussions around what solidarity might look like in this moment and what shifts are necessary for Haitians to lead, more specifically creating space for those most impacted by violence or disaster, as well as those most marginalized. So I will hand it off to Jake Johnston.